Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for attending. As you will have seen from the most recent ACERT press release, the situation that occurred yesterday at the Neufeld Hotel was extremely dynamic and unfolded quickly, despite attempts from our members to de-escalate the situation. Given that ACERT is investigating the incident, I will keep my remarks at a higher level. To begin with, I do want to acknowledge that a person died in this incident. That person had a family and friends who today find themselves mourning the tragic loss of a loved one. On behalf of all of us at CPS, I extend my condolences to all of those who've been impacted by this incident. Events like this can also shake our communities. We are fortunate to live in a safe, beautiful city where incidents like this are infrequent. But when they do occur, it can be unsettling, particularly for those who live and work in the immediate area. For anyone who may be impacted and in need of assistance, I invite you to reach out to our Victim Assistance Support Team, or VAST, for more information or resources. As I expect would also be obvious, these incidents are extremely difficult for our officers and their families as well. No police officer ever wants to be in a position where they're required to use deadly force. We hire great people, and they choose this profession to help those in need, to keep the public safe, and to save lives. They always aim to communicate, to de-escalate, and to achieve a peaceful resolution to dispatched events that they attend. But there are times when, despite the best training, the best tactics, the best tools, and even the very best of intentions, where peaceful resolution isn't to be. In these tense moments, the preservation of life for bystanders and even the officers themselves necessarily becomes the immediate priority. As a practical reality, the reactions of our officers will at times be dictated by the actions of the person they're working to try and help. Our officers are well trained to deal with dynamic situations. In the vast majority of calls, including ones like the one yesterday, they're able to work with the person to obtain voluntary compliance without any use of force being required. As a part of their training, they're provided with a variety of tools and tactics that span the spectrum from no use of force whatsoever to extreme cases where lethal force may become necessary in response to a real concern for public or officer safety. These decisions are often made in a split second, but they are never made lightly. These particular decisions result in necessary and understandable accountability processes for the officers involved. These processes, as you know, can continue on for a very long time. The first of these accountability processes is the ACERT investigation. And as the investigation by ACERT continues, I can assure you that our officers and our service are fully cooperating with that investigation. Based on my understanding and my knowledge of this situation, I'm confident that the investigation will ultimately demonstrate that our officers conducted themselves appropriately, reacting in the best interests of public safety. The incident was captured on multiple body-worn video cameras, and I'm certain that this evidence will be particularly helpful to the assigned ACERT investigators. My full support is with the officers who responded to this incident and all of the officers who day in and day out proudly serve Calgarians and protect them from harm. Our officers have faced a number of very difficult and very dangerous situations, even if I think back just to December. And as you know, well, an officer did lose his life in one of these incidents. Whether it's a firearm, a vehicle, or whatever that's used as a weapon, police officers do face very real risk, very real harm, and notwithstanding that, they continue to put on their uniforms and perform their duties with professionalism, courage, and compassion. To my officers, this has been a difficult time, and I do want you to know that you're supported. I support you, the senior leadership team supports you, and your community supports you as you continue to respond to and manage some very challenging situations in these extraordinary times. I would also like to take a moment to thank the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team for providing as much information as they have in this case, and to have done so in such a timely manner. I think this is really important. In situations like this, the public expects accountability and transparency when there's an officer-involved shooting. We're fully committed to these principles and have full confidence in the work of ACERT as an independent investigative body looking into these matters. If I can answer any questions for you at this point, I'd be happy to do that.
At this time, we don't have any. We do have a question from Alana Smith at Post Media. Go ahead, Alana.
Hey, Chief, thanks for taking my question. I'm wondering if you know how many officers attended the call yesterday?
That was a little quiet, Alana, but I think I heard the question. I believe it was how many officers attended the call. There would have been a number of officers. I don't know the exact number, but I'm thinking there would have probably been, multiple units, and there would have been many more after when roadways were closed off and whatever. But initially, I would suggest there were multiple units, although I can't tell you the exact number.
Thank you. And just one follow-up. Sorry, my mic is not so great, but I'm not sure if you can speak to this, but it almost appears to be a situation, suicide by cop. Can you say anything towards that?
I wouldn't, Alana. I think that would be something that ACERT may comment on or not, depending on what they find as they continue through the investigative process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on to Jill Croteau from Global News.
Yes, good afternoon, Chief. Thanks for taking my question. I know you touched on this a little bit in your opening remarks, but if you could just maybe speak a little bit more to maybe the challenges, just given, the current climate and sort of the scrutiny that sometimes officers face, that when these kinds of things happen, it just kind of brightens that spotlight a little bit on your members. How do you sort of reconcile those critics out there? How do you counter that to the job that you have to do?
Thanks, Jill. Good question. And I think that's part of the reason for speaking out today. And I'm in a bit of a unique situation because, as you know, normally the ACERT investigation into matters like this would be, in its relative infancy. In this particular case, I think because the Calgary Police Service ascribes to body-worn video, I think there were some things that were able to accelerate, some level of comfort around putting out some additional information, which I think is really helpful in these cases. Because I think in absence of information, there's oftentimes, rumor and assumptions and that sort of thing will seem to fill that information gap. And I think that's a bad thing. Like I say, we hire great people and we train them well and we equip them well, and they manage these situations quite well. But the reality of it is they can't all, and they won't all, and the way we would want them to. We know that. So we would never want to be in a situation where they don't, but we know sometimes they don't. And I think that, there's been more of a predisposition probably, lately to rush to judgment about these things. And I think it's been very hard on police. I think they feel a lot of pressure just because of that rush to judgment. So this is one of these times I'm thankful that we've got a bit of additional information that enables me to come out and say what I would like to say. And like I say, it's good for our people.
Thank you. I have no follow-up.
Thank you, Jill. Moving on to Taylor from City News.
Hi, Chief. Thanks for taking my question. Can you hear me?
I can, Taylor. Go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah, you're loud and
thanks.
clear.
Yeah, there was some information omitted that can't be given right now. So I'm not sure if you can answer this, but I'm wondering why that information has been withheld from the time the woman showed up with the pellet gun until she was shot. And do you know if we will be learning more about this?
Sorry, I didn't know the information was omitted, and I'm not sure who you're looking to for that. But the bottom line is, the specific interaction between the officers and the individual, that's exactly squarely within the mandate of ACERT and what they're trying to include in their investigation. So I suspect that it's probably a matter of time before they would release that type of information. But honestly, that's something that would come from them at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. We have a question from Jim Wells, Post Media.
Good afternoon, Chief. How are you doing today?
Good, Jim. How about you?
Good. I'm wondering if you're able to offer sort of a timeline on how long this whole situation took place from the time the officers arrived up until you considered the situation de-escalated. And also, can you tell us what sort of de-escalation methods were used, as well as possible use of less lethal weapons?
Sure. So I'm going to stay away from the timeline, Jim, only because Taylor's comments about the fact that that's been held back, and it may be that ACERT's holding that back for investigative reasons. So I won't go there. What I will tell you, though, is that our officers, when they responded to the situation, so sort of interaction that resulted in shots being fired, the information that they had in relation to this call was really not very clear. And so, as is often the case when officers respond to situations, they don't always have, a great picture as to what's happening. So some of it ends up getting filled in when they get there. But one thing they did know was that there was a belief that there was a firearm involved at the scene. So I can tell you, just in terms of the de-escalation and the mission, if you will, when they arrived there, they purposely did not go up to or into that room. They're very concerned about the potential for violence if they were to do that. I can tell you made reference to was there less lethal options there, and I can tell you yes, there was. The tactics that were put in place to try to manage this safely and get this to a place through empathetic, sort of compassionate, reassuring communication, those things were in place, and at a point they didn't work any longer. And so from that point on, that's the ACERT investigation.
And
Jim,
yes, thanks. Just one follow-up, sir. I'm wondering if you could tell us how many shots were fired at this incident, and were there any other people that were potentially in danger in that hotel room?
So at the time, the officers didn't know, as I said, didn't have a complete picture as to what they were going into. So they didn't know how many people might be in the hotel room at the time. We now know that there was nobody else in the hotel room with the benefit of hindsight. I can tell you that there were 2 officers that fired their weapons. There were multiple shots fired. Nobody else was injured.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim. That's it for questions in the chat box, unless we have anybody that would like to ask a follow-up or a final. I'm not seeing anything, so we will conclude today's press conference. Thank you all for joining us.